In the 19th century, that's how long we have this already, museums established a paradigm for collecting artworks for future generations based on material conservation and displaying the artwork's historical state. And since then, protecting artworks from the destructive forces of time remains central to many museums' missions and operations today. However, internet art challenges us to reevaluate this approach. Next slide. And we have lost the Zoom. Yeah, and we're back. I'm so sorry, we have a problem with Zoom for some reason, but I'm gonna... There we are again. So what this roundtable seeks to do is to engage both the panelists, but also you as an audience, in discussing strategies for regenerative curation, exploring its challenges, but also its potentials for internet art. This approach to curation is based on the idea that artworks continuously regenerate within social, technical, and ecological environments. Instead of fixations, it allows artworks to revitalize within contemporary contexts. The artwork is approached as a living system that evolves over time, and therefore it can involve renewal, transformation, but also forms of decay. While this approach provides museum curators with a new form of flexibility, this is really something. We go in and out of the Zoom. It's very regenerative. Yeah. Oh yeah, of course I'm on the wrong mouse. I always have that. Oh, and there's so many cursors on my screen that I don't even know who's mine anymore. Oh, I don't have a cursor. It's totally Annette's. Right, and there. There you go. There. Annette, only if it's possible, can you change the slides? Maybe this is even causing it. No, it's not. And I go immediately to the next. So while this approach museum curators, and actually already the next, we're already further even. So on the one hand, this gives museum curators a form of flexibility. On the other hand, it requires also a profound understanding of an artwork biography to determine the most suitable display format. To find solutions, we ideally collaborate with a diverse team of academics and museum staff with media-related expertise, including curators, conservators, technicians, intellectual property managers, registers, and the digital team, whatever is part of the museum, of course. And this approach also inspired our panel today. And therefore, I'm very honored that I will be joined today by an incredible panel whose members have all made significant contributions to shaping how we think about internet art, all from their own perspectives on historicizing, curating, preserving, and archiving these artworks. So first of all, I'm joined here today by Inge, who is sitting over here, will joining us on the panel later, hopefully. Inge Hinterwaldner, Professor of Art History at KIT here in Karlsruhe, who significantly advanced our understanding of internet art, also through her research on complex digital artworks. We will hear more about that later, as well as her expertise on image and system theory, interactivity and temporality in computer-based arts. Annet Dekker, who is joining us online, has played a key role in advancing the field of curation, preservation, and archiving of internet art. Okay, great. She's an associate professor of cultural analysis at the University of Amsterdam and also holds several research positions at museums, including Tate Modern and at New Institute. Lozana Rosanova is a researcher at TIP in Hanover working on the NFDI for Culture project. Her doctorate focused on redesigning the art base at RISEM, an essential resource for internet art, and her work with open source initiatives like Wikibase and also designing knowledge graphs has offered important insights into how we can collect and archive those artworks. And last but not least, Dragan Espenschied, who is RISEM's preservation director, responsible for preserving thousands, I think, of web-based artworks by now. And his innovative work is not only vital towards the field of internet art, but I think in preservation more general. I am Karin de Wild, Assistant Professor of Museum and Collection Studies at Leiden Universities. I'm currently finalizing my monograph on curating internet art, and I'm also PI on a project that is developing a program for it. And I will start with highlighting a few of my own cases, and then I will give it on to my other panel members to actually show what regenerative curation is or what it can be. So from 2014 onwards, and that's on the next slide, I closely collaborated with artist duo Jody to further develop strategies for the display of their work, jody.org, within a museum context. The artwork that we are showing here was run on the old Mac with also a classic keyboard and mouse, alongside a brand new Mac computer. However, on both devices, the work was shown in an emulation of the original Netscape browser of the time, this to emphasize the importance of the browser over the specific equipment that was used. The artwork jody.org is not just a website, but it is a complex network of interconnected artwork, raising a critical question of how the audience can navigate from one piece to another. To address this, Jody developed a screening script, and we hired an operator to follow those instructions, presenting the early works from jody.org that were created by between 1995 and 1999. And it was in a kind of performance-like matter. So while the photo shows only the screen, what we don't see here is that there was this operator sitting behind his desk with multiple computers trying to perform the work and navigate through it. At the same time, we also invited museum professionals and collectors to explore potential cultural context and evolving perspectives and get a discussion how jody.org could be collected and displayed within a museum setting, offering also more discursive space within the exhibition itself. At the same time that jody.org was displayed at the Van Elle Fabriek in Rotterdam, 2 videos appeared on the website of Media and Moving Arts, another arts institution in Rotterdam. And within that, artists Rafael Rozenam and Constant Dullard engaged with Jody's work, adding new layers of interpretation. The aim was to display jody.org as an active platform that bridges different generations and connected spaces across the city, but also both online and offline. Let me briefly touch upon a second example. Next slide. And I hope it works, but maybe it's just a black slide. But it is a work that we commissioned, the video installation Chinese Coin Red Blood by Übermorgen for the Digital Arts Festival in the UK, Neon. It offers a glimpse into a Chinese Bitcoin mining factory, a rarely seen and little understood space. At the time, the ambitions were even bigger. We didn't only want to show a video, but we wanted to build an installation in which Bitcoins were mined within the exhibition space itself. And this ambition hasn't been realized yet, but we hope one day this will. The artwork is part of the artist's research into digital economies in China, and therefore it builds upon an earlier piece, Chinese Gold, that started in 2006 and is still ongoing, which explores gold farming within the multiplayer game World of Warcraft. The project documents the phenomena of Chinese gold farmers, workers who produce in-game currencies and sell it to Western players. Chinese Gold is a blend of research, documentation, and storytelling, and it constantly evolves and expands. Its current archive contains over 10 gigabytes of data. Lima, a couple of years later, took the initiative to explore this archive in order to create a system to connect its various file formats and make the materials accessible to the audience. They also decided to display, and that's on the next slide, next two slides, I think.
I don't think it is.
I'm communicating.
Oh yeah, it does work.
Can you click on the button here?
Yeah, I can. I hope I can. There you go. And it's there. Thank you. So in this case, they also decided to display the artworks Chinese coin Red Blood and Chinese Gold together, showing the biography of the artwork and how it changed over time. What both examples demonstrate is the contribution of exhibitions to the creation and documentation of new variations, versions, and sometimes complete new artworks. It also demonstrates the importance of breaking out of departmental silos, curation and preservation, and that's why I'm really happy that we're also accepted here within this conference. Collecting and archiving are ideally a collaborative endeavor, and this can also involve multiple institutions caring for the same artwork. We will hear more about that later. But before that, let me bring up another example. Annette, can I get the next slide? And this is a project that we just started to work on together with Maro Pebo, who is a curator at Waag Future Lab in Amsterdam, and which involves the display of the digital city. Initiated in January 1994, the digital city was the first online community in Amsterdam, comparable with GeoCity, but earlier. And it was the fourth website of the World Wide Web. And this gave this digital-born artifact also the status of UNESCO Memory of the World, which is the first digital-born heritage. Over the years, there were various web archaeological initiatives to retrieve as much as possible of the early days, including retrieving and restoring hardware, code, and files. The gathered material is now collected and preserved by the Amsterdam Museum, the Museum of Sound and Vision, and the Royal Library. Yet what has not been fully explored yet is how to display this work. Through regenerative curation, we like to explore how the democratic values that underpins the digital city are still relevant today. It imagined a community-driven, common-based internet that opted for total user control. The citizens of the digital city determined which data was shared and which was not. We like to study the original digital city, but as well as its utopian scenarios. But we also like to relate it to artworks that contain speculative scenarios for how this could function within the web today, or how it can make us critically reflect on how the web is functioning today. And within that, we also like to inform experiments for developing a new social media platform, a development that is going on within Waag Future Lab at the moment. So I think with that, just because of time, I would like to skip over the next case and actually give the word to Inge, so that you can also show some of the cases that you wanted to.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me to that panel. I'm really happy that we were brought together. So my name is Inge Hinterwaldner, and I could actually also pick up the thread. Annette, you are hearing me? Pick up the thread that you laid out when you mentioned Jodi.org. So Jodi was also key in our research and was featured in many of our experiments, the latest being a game that my research group Coded Secrets is finalizing right now. So thanks to my colleagues who are finishing now 3 formats at the same time, a book, a game, and a paper version of the game. So we do all the steps that we see here in the first opening slide, conceptualizing, realizing, and also exhibiting, what we internally refer to as walkthrough article. My pitch today is about designing game spaces as conceptual walks through individual artworks. Coming from theory and not so much from curation yet, when dealing with complex networked artworks, we focus on analysis and contextualization. And accordingly, my approach is to bring those results to a larger audience as well by transcending the book format into an exhibition environment, maybe. So in other words, I ask whether and how an interactive computer game can be a valuable knowledge format and space for showing a potentially retired or also not artwork from within. What I propose can be viewed as a sort of staging or reviving of how components of an artwork look like, relate to each other, form sequences, work hand in hand. And this involves a lot of showing, explaining, and also interpreting. When I say we would like to show the work from within, that should not suggest that it is kind of a neutral way. So it's definitely seen from a perspective, or rather from various perspectives. And if we go to the next slide, we could see that we have developed 4 rooms, each dealing with a different facet of the artwork, each dealing and featuring a different perspective. And I'm quickly rushing through. So the red room, and this is the next slide, please, deals with the graphical user interface and its layered composition. The cyan room, next slide, analyzes the artwork source code and focuses on the implementation of randomness functions. The green room analyzes the difference between what is hard-coded and what emerges during an execution of the artwork. And the yellow room is conducted synchronous and transversal comparisons between the historical versions of the artwork, which I haven't mentioned yet. The artwork is by Jody, a wrong browser called .com. So, and in this room we look at several exe files. Next slide, please. When documenting the material or the artwork, the material is often scarce, but in Jody's case we are actually quite lucky because I found 3 historical screenshots that we see here and one being published by Annet. It's difficult when looking at the screenshots to get clarity about the richness if it is one artwork in different moments of time, or if it is different versions of an artwork that we see here. And these 3 screenshots, for instance, if you look closely, have so many inconsistencies that it is really difficult to say whether it's actually the same artwork. And in the game, we let the players interactively explore why this is the case. In our approach of wrapping our analytic results into a game experience, we want to counter these difficulties. This builds upon the conviction that it fosters understanding by drawing information together and by condensing knowledge into models based on the bits and pieces assembled during our research. So in art history, we have the huge advantage of dealing with visual arts. That means we can easily anchor our models in visual quotes from the artwork. In this way, people are oriented what part we are actually talking about. And if we go to the next slide, I provided a nested 4-step scheme of, the next, please, I skipped that one. 4-step scheme of how we could actually go there and provide that models. This is derived from our practice, and so in order to make that more graspable, the next 4 slides will show you that. So we started, next slide please, from very long descriptions, and they are also not linear, so it turned out that the long text description of the artwork is not ideal. Then we went on to visualizing and modeling elements. The next slide. We model rules, we model statistics, we model correlations. And the next step would be the clustering of the models and situating them. So a lot of correlation work. And the final step would be implementing that clusters into a larger flow of information that is argumentation and that is storytelling. So regenerative curating with our approach could mean drawing a wealth of information together by creating an environment where situated storytelling of close reading is possible. In order to make an artwork more alive and not only more digestible for a larger public, but for the audience, it should get a chance of embodying the functioning of the artwork and remembering in a different way by walking through. So how could we as theoreticians move towards curation is one question, and how could we begin to build a bridge towards conservation as well? Because normally we write texts, and in order to furniture the game space, we integrated much more data than we would normally need in order to make our argumentation. This additional data is needed first to understand when we do the analysis, but moreover to form the visual tableau, the visual background against which we bring our points across. So we create small situations in the game where models can be operated and information can be animated. So it's a little bit like in a science museum. And I'm really happy to discuss also with you and with the audience how we can translate such an outcome of our research into further knowledge formats, like, for instance, a database, or like, for instance, an exhibition. So thank you very much. And now I have the pleasure to hand over to Annet.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So I will pick up on this notion of storytelling in a way, and I will tell you a story. And maybe it's going to be a practice of regenerative curation or preservation. I don't know yet. Anyway, we'll see. So on the 3rd of March 2016, I received this email from Igor Strohmeyer, a very well-known Slovenian artist who has worked as a performance and net artist since the 1990s. The email and the subject were unusual. And in the message, he asked me to keep some files safe. I opened the attachments, which turned out to be 2 abstract cropped images, 2 GIFs, one of someone sitting on a toilet, the other of a toilet, roll paper, and a sound file of less than a second. I didn't recognize the images, and I thought they were part, perhaps, of one of his earlier artworks, perhaps some of the remnants, the fragments of his deletion performance called Expunctions just a few years earlier. So I wasn't really sure what to do with all this, so I just put it in my 2016 email archive folder and didn't think much about it. At the end of 2017, I published a book called Lost and Living in Archives. The book was a collection of articles and interviews around the fragmentary nature of archives. And one of the contributions was a conversation between Sakowski and Igor about his expunction project from 2011, during which he deleted a large selection of his early networks. On the 1st of March 2018, I received another email from Igor with the same subject as 2 years previous. Again, asking me to keep the attached files, now encrypted, in a safe space. Yet this time, there was more information announcing how he had sent this email to, quote-unquote, a smaller group of people I respect and trust. You're among them. In 2 years, in March 2020, the 3rd selection of people will be made to get the 3rd and final package. I became more intrigued by the project and decided to contact him to find out more about his ideas and the aims of the project. He told me -4 times, if 4 times means sending the sets of files 4 times, more means that it's a micro, an intimate action gesture online performance. The minus could mean that I'm not real true, but a pseudo-para-proto-artist, but I'm not entirely sure about that meaning. Those are the things that he told me. On the 4th of March 2020, I received this 3rd email with more encrypted files. The performative action continued, where I potentially would become part of this most trusted contacts and potentially find the ultimate final package. Time passed. nothing happened on the 1st of March 2022, or on the 3rd of March 2022, nor the 4th of March 2022, or any of the days after that. Those dates in March that seemed significant came and went without an email arriving. In the meantime, now and then I return to this project, particularly when asked to speak about the future of digital art and how its preservation could transform into what I've called a network of care, a concept that I started to develop in my PhD to signal how human, non-human networks care for art. On the 30th of May in 2023, while trying to expand on this notion of networks of care, I emailed Igor asking him about more information about the project. What were the intentions behind it? How was it set up? How did it evolve over time? And what are the next steps? In a few hours, on the 31st of May 2023, I received this fourth email. I wasn't sure what to think of it or how to respond. It felt too much of a coincidence. Had he perhaps forgotten me when he had sent out his fourth email? I felt disremembered, discarded, expunged. I called for a meeting, and in the meeting we had, it became clear. It wasn't an accident. The emails were not about the files, hence their encryption. They were initiated, triggers to start a conversation, a one-on-one interaction, a micro-performance about trust, communication, and intimacy. As Igor explained, minus me 4 times is about creating a form of intimacy that would leave traces that are non-obtrusive, non-spectacular, non-public, non-explanatory, and non-descriptive. Over time, they became a habitual event, selecting the people, arranging the files, finding the database with all the data. What is sent to whom, at what time, who responds, at what time, in what context, to what extent, giving rise to a huge pyramid of trusted friends structured by time and numbers. So mu minus 4 times reflects the temporality of many digital artworks. The network is instigated by the first email, but its development is ambiguous, prone to rupture or loss, and the result is open to speculation, depending on the actions of its recipients, who don't know each other. A community is being built around trust, respect, emotional connections, and personal favors. Here, the files I learned are dear to Igor, and they range from fragments of artwork, early versions, half notes, personal photos, and even parts of early Netscape installers. Perhaps one day I will receive an email with the key to open the files and trust it to me, or to connect with another trustee. In the meantime, time dissolves as files circulate between various layers of numerical code, become entangled in databases and servers, or conjure within email programs. Minus mu times 4 presents and performs a living network of care that adapts to the flexible requirements of its human, non-human participants. And with this, I'd like to give the floor to our next speaker.
Okay, so I'm the next speaker, and I put a mirror below this headline. It's a cool Google slide effect because it's about materiality, and something that is reflected must be there in some way. So yeah, I'm a conservator, so I'm not a curator, and I want to make that clear. So in some ways, I provide material for curators, and of course I work with them and everything, but that's not my role. And Annette's role is to flip the slides. Annette, you can call on me anytime. I will flip your slides too. Can you advance to the next? Oh yeah, okay. So I want to talk quickly about 3 retrospective exhibitions because I think they're quite illustrative for what I want to say. So it's the Aurea Harvey retrospective that was just launched in the beginning of the year, curated by Regina Har-Sani. The art happens here at the New Museum, curated by Michael Conn and Aria Dean, which is Rhizome's own retrospective exhibition. And then My boyfriend came back to the war online since 1996, curated by Annet, Sabine Himmelsbach at Haus der elektronischen Künste. And can you advance the slide, please? Oh yeah. And I just want to show a few photos. So from the each of these exhibitions featured like brand new work like this digital sculpture on a holographic display. Can you advance, please? Or here, like half legacy works that with some kind of trickery, you can still get to work on your regular Windows 10 computer. Can you please advance? And then like the classic net artworks by Aurea from the 1990s, which I was responsible for, which are shown in emulation and on like period adequate display screens. And these are like, how are they, and I found it interesting, like how are they living in this exhibition? Like these are like stabilized to the max. Also these browsers that are in there, they are not going out. I mean, websites at that point in time were like linking out left and right into all kinds of resources. And so there's a proxy use that if you leave the artwork, you are actually going into the web of the 90s using a proxy. Can you please advance? And yeah, this is the exhibition view of The Art Happens Here. And you see also there's a similar setup here with like period adequate systems or like displays. The emulator is very clearly shown. It's not like trying to, I don't know, create some teenage boy's bedroom, which is you often see in some exhibitions, but it's like this is a good display for this work. Everything, including like any servers that you need and the emulator, is encapsulated in that like little desktop computer, and there's like the input device that you would need. Next slide, please. And this is embedded in all kinds of other artifacts and technological installations. So this is how it looks more close up. Also work by Aurea Harvey. Next slide, please. And here in the My Boyfriend Came Back from the War retrospective, this is also again such a work where a VRML work from 1999 was made to be run on some like NVIDIA card with stereoscopy and so forth, things that wouldn't have been possible in the 90s when it was created. So it's like it's more of a hack in a hack. Can you please advance? And then of course we have, again, this is where we pioneered the setup, right? This period adequate display, period adequate input device. There's also props on the tables. These computers don't do anything. The actual emulators are below the table, and there's not much secrecy done about it. And there was also at the time Guthrie Lonergan work that was like very new that you would need to run on the latest computer. Okay, advance, please. But it all comes down to like what kind of materials you have available, like what is there. There's always a performative aspect to these types of net artworks and a like material aspect. So with the Thing archive, which was a mailbox network launched in the early 90s by Wolfgang Stähle in New York, we also found the original software, the original bulletin board system. And this is like impossible to use for anyone. This was some like awful MS-DOS software that you would like rather die than use. And also it wouldn't be possible to load all the messages into it because it can only hold like 10,000 messages at one time. Next slide, please. So here since we had the messages as raw material available and like the headers, we decided that the conversation thread is the object, not the message itself. And then you can see that this is a conversation that starts in April 1993 and goes to May 1993. And you see like the rhythm, how people reply to each other. You can click on each of these and get the message to read that. Can you advance, please? And here you see, like, I like these views, like that the online conversations had a very different rhythm from how they work today. And so this visualization like exemplifies that, but it's not an attempt to, I don't know, pretend that you can, I don't know, make a bulletin board system like today, or this is an alternative to Discord or something. This is more like an invitation to reflect on how this worked, who dominated conversations back then, how were this conversation structured. It is not, like throwing you into an MS-DOS interface. Next slide, please, and that's the last one. And you see this is like the raw data that we received, which is IDs for these messages were synthetically generated because they go from 0 to 9,999 and then they roll over to 0. But we had the date, we had the sender, the recipient, the group it was in, and the message body, like the basics, and what the message was a reply to. Yeah, so that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Annet, and sorry that I'll also be bothering you with next slide. We can just go to the next immediately. I know we're really short on time. So I'm just going to quickly read so I don't talk too much, which I tend to do. But I'll start with this idea of the useful archive because it's the symposium that kickstarted the Swiss Think collaboration with Critical Media Lab in Basel. And very briefly, I want to bring in the idea of the archive in use as a path to generate memories and thereby regenerate creative works and creative processes. And I'm talking about the Swiss Think, and we can go to the next slide, please. Because, I wanted to pick up on some of the ideas that Rhizome have been developing thanks to Dragan, and share some extension of this work via our collaboration with the Critical Media Lab in Basel, where, again, we're partnering with Rhizome and my lab, the Open Science Lab at the TIB, but we're taking a slightly different approach to BBS, and we're focusing a little bit differently on the idea of regeneration there. So the Swiss Think, very briefly, is a continuation of the idea of the thing as a BBS, but this time in Switzerland. It's a BBS, a website, a media lab, and ultimately a knowledge-sharing site that had a strong focus on events in the early days of the web, including things like training and teaching people how to set up an email address, for example. The project is focused around the personal archive of artist Barbara Strebel, who started the Swiss Think, and it involves partners from the Critical Media Lab and other project partners listed there. And we can go to the next slide, please. So what is actually in this archive? What is the archive material? It includes digital files that will need some restoration work, thanks to Dragan again. But it also involves a lot of boxes and boxes and boxes of paper records, which tend to be typically printed out digital files. So a lot of printed out emails, a lot of printed out BBS messages, different kind of flyers for community events, etc. And thinking about how to organize these materials online, we come to the idea and question of use in the archive. And if we can go to the next slide, please. I don't really want to talk too much about my PhD research with Rhizome, but I kind of have to. I mean, it's just embedded in my brain too much. So I'm just going to use this diagram from the case study work on the art base. And basically what this diagram showcases is the blueprint schematic for the proposed redesign of the ArtBase archive. And here the idea of use is connected to processes of classification and maintenance. And those are in turn framing choices of data model, or with what we can also think of as data architecture, the database, which I tend to think of as the infrastructure, and then we have the interface. And if we can go to the next slide, please. We can see that basically, and more concretely, the framework of this schematic is using linked open data for flexible data architecture. And we're also using the open source software Wikibase for the infrastructure. The interface becomes the main vehicle not only for use, but also for preservation and regeneration through user interaction and the creation, hopefully, of memories. And we can go to the next slide, please. So what's interesting about the Swiss Think as opposed to the thing, I mean, both are interesting, but, we're taking a slightly different approach here because we have to justify research funding. No, joking. But we basically have this completely different approach as we're focusing on events, actually, and we're focusing on events rather than objects like artworks or individual messages or individual records. The events tend to be activities like someone posting a
a message to the BBS or live meetups and people hanging out together, creating new things, which is kind of, I think, getting to the heart of the Swiss thing as a project, an artwork, a performance, and a site of knowledge sharing. Events themselves are documented in records, and we can go to the next slide. And the records can be described with a range of additional attributes. And finally, if we also go to the next slide, they can have different instantiations in digital or analog form. Everyone should technically have access to these slides in the Google Drive, so please have a look. What I'm showing here is just like some screenshots of the data model, which overlays several different standard ontologies, including CDOC, CRM, records in context, PROV, etc. And ultimately, we can go to the last slide. Ultimately, what we care to share is the network of relations that can be traced once the archive material is structured and made available to use via the wiki infrastructure and custom front-end visualizations. Through regenerating the network, we hope to bring more light to what the knowledge-sharing spirit of the time was and how different agents operated within it. And full disclosure, this image is from Rhizome's Artbase, simply because I wanted to show the direction we're going into with the Critical Media Lab project. The Critical Media Lab project just started this year, so there's still lots of work to do. We have 3 more years to get to some kind of more interactive situation like this. And that's it. Thank you so much.
Okay, do we have any questions for the panelists? Anyone online have any questions? There's something in the chat. Oh, sorry, did I miss anyone here? Were there any questions here? No? Okay.
I don't know, I was curious, like you really kind of portrayed the relationship between the conservator and, or the archivist and the artist as quite active. So I wonder if you see this as a requirement or what kind of recommendations you would have, like when a conservator is first trying to engage in those conversations?
Okay, I can start. Like, what I think is an example that I have been part of Team Media in SF MoMA. And actually the way they structure their organization is that they're a much more networked organization. And their staff from all over the museum is brought together to actually look at those artworks and from their perspective contribute what they think is needed the moment that these artworks are going on to display. So if you're a conservator within that team, you are not within a lab outside of the curatorial team, but also the curators are not separated from those labs. And I think it was for me it helped a lot to understand those artworks from various perspectives. And the exhibition was actually the moment, but it can be also something else. It can also be that there is a moment that actually an artwork really is decaying, and we think actually this is the moment that we should start working on it. But having a team with diverse perspectives gives a much richer understanding of what these artworks are, and also to find solutions for bringing them on display. I don't know if you...
Yeah, I totally agree. So it's really the same in our group, and we always try to interview the artists. So sometimes we are also relying on them giving us their source code. Sometimes we don't need that, and we get that with other sources. But nonetheless, that is really a very valuable source of information. In our case, we approached this project as an own research, with own research questions. So we were not talking to the artists, trying to find out how they think their work should live on. So that was not the case in our game version, for instance.
Maybe just one little remark I could make about because this was actually about internet art here, and I've also shown pictures from museums and so forth, but internet art, as Annet showed, can live on the internet. And so there is, in many cases, not that exhibition moment, or things have to live on after an exhibition. And that's also why, in many cases, bringing something to an exhibition is not naturally preserving it in that sense, but it's like a restaging of something that will be torn down after the exhibition is over, and that's not the case usually with net art.
To add something very quickly, I highlighted the artist's name in the presentation about the Swiss thing because that whole project is really focused on working very closely with the artist and the whole network of other creatives in the city of Basel around the Swiss thing. So I think it is quite fundamental, especially for the art historical and research team. I'm more just doing infrastructure for them. But yeah, in my experience, basically every project that I've worked on to do with media arts, we've collaborated closely with the artists. So I would say it's essential.
They die.
And this is, I think, an important thing. Like Joan and Dirk often told me, we're not dead yet. But there is a moment, and I think especially curators within museums and art historians, we think about the moment that the artwork needs to carry on having some form of life when the artist is no longer present. And personally, my experience is that it's really important to start thinking about their scenarios the moment that the artist is alive. How do you want your work to be carried on afterwards? And we have already seen examples within the Whitney Fuchs Museum, for example, the longest collaborative sentence, which is now in various versions. One, because actually it was not completely known how the artist wanted this artwork to be carried on after, for example, flesh became absolute. So then, yeah, it is a possibility to then work with different versions, but there will be a moment that the communities needs to take over those artworks, and of course we're going to also question co-authorship within net art as well, and the fact that who is actually the artist in the end of those artworks when a lot of contributions are made. So there's a lot to say about who is the artist and what is the role of the artist and the artist's intent in those works.
Anything else? If not, we will. Oh, yes, Dave.
I don't know if I can make this brief, but I was just kind of curious by your comment of like being unclear on how an artist would want you to carry on art as all the technology and world changes around it. And I was kind of connecting this to Dragon's comment about not going too far to hide the emulators under the table when the hardware on the table is just kind of like a token to display it. So I was curious about the sort of relationship between the crafting a modern display of an old work and the audience. Like, how far are you going to tell them? Like, not just that it is hidden, but there is some manipulation to what the artist made, because I don't know, I imagine a lot of these artworks come from people with very precise visions on how they want it to.
I think in net art you have a different situation, because no single net art piece was ever made to be watched on some, or like encountered on some particular device or some particular setting. It was made to be encountered with whatever some user would bring into the mix, which makes it exciting. But so you have more freedom in that direction. And it is also that, you can easily go into some, like, I don't know, putting the first iMac computer in a museum. And when this computer was new, no one would look at the net art because the iMac computer looked so great. And now people also want to look at that iMac computer because it's so colorful, and the computers today are so boring. So I think being quite open, like this is a reconstruction, or this is like one version of the thing, is really essential. Otherwise, you're kind of like fooling people. And also, with this precision, from my experience, as a rhizome is like coming from a community organization, like morphing into an institution. And I believe an important community service is to relieve artists of the burden of maintenance of their stuff, because otherwise they can create 5 works and then they have to maintain them and don't have any capacity to do more. I think that also plays into it. I mean, some artists make like a business model out of maintaining their work, which I absolutely respect, and they have studios and assistants and so forth, but many don't have these resources.
And maybe a question also for Inge in this, because this is what we talked about as well, the audience experience. I think that is something that of course, it's a great moment during an exhibition that you can test audience experiences and what to do with it. Even if it's shown on exactly the same Mac from the time, or shown on a computer or a telephone that we all have today. But I was wondering for you as well, Inge, like how do we bring in these audience experiences, or how is this influencing the way we might experience those artworks today?
I think it's a very important facet. In the game I presented, we did not focus too much on the audience, except for the room that compares the hard-coded process versus the emergent phenomena, which then discusses also how confused you are, for instance. But we have other experiments done with Jodi's browsers, where we asked, for instance, 10 people coming from the digital realm of different disciplines, and asking them how they perceive this one artwork, all the same, and how they would actually create a best documentation of that. And what came out is a little book that we published called Navigation, where we see how big the variety is, how rich the variety is for something that we requested, not only that they perceive it, but they develop a best of. So that was really fascinating. And I think it is important that we try to integrate the variety of approaches and what people, how people deal with artworks. So when I did also a small exhibition in Zurich, I tried to have a look at how people approach it and how far they get within exploring an artwork, for instance. And there are so different strategies, and that's such a rich insight. So I would opt for variety and try to get more voices in.
Okay, that's all the time for now. Thank you so much. Those are special presentations.